Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. On behalf of WBFN, we thank you for joining today's session. This session would be a recorded session, and we would be muting every time there's a question that's being asked and answered. And we'll resume once that's passed. I hope that's okay with everyone. We have with us from the Family Consultation Service, Malahat and Diana. Diana will be conducting the session. So moving on, I'll share the floor with Diana now. Thank you very much, Diana.
Thank you, Sarah, for the introduction and the invitation. It's always fun for me and enjoyable to present for WBFN. I share a little about me before being a World Bank staff. I've been a World Bank spouse way before that, so I consider WBFN still my house. So I appreciate very much being here. I've been looking and thinking and reading about the topic that I chose to talk about today a lot. I have 3 kids of my own. My oldest will be 14 soon. I have an 11-year-old girl and a 6-year-old boy. And everything I'll talk about today, even though it comes from research and backed by literacy and studies, it comes from a very personal place too, because it seems we're all going through the same thing. And I'll be sharing some of my own struggles here at home and how we've been walking through them and helping our own kids go through it, hoping that maybe that will be helpful for you. I'm part of the Family Consultation Service within the counseling unit, and we'll talk about the program at the end. Everybody is welcome to reach out, and we hope we can be of help. We'll be doing something a bit fun today in this presentation, just because I think nobody likes boring presentations. I'm hoping I can make it a bit more entertaining. It's early here in DC. It might be night wherever you are, so just to make it more engaging. So I'm gonna ask, there we go. I'm gonna ask everybody, you can do it from your same computer or you can do it from your phones, to go to menti.com. You see it right there at the top. And just open your browser and go to menti.com. It's going to ask you for a code. The code for this presentation is 28506. And I just wanted to test if we're able to use this platform by asking which one do you think it's cuter? Which of the 2 pictures you think it's cuter? Oh, I see dog winning. We're a dog family. I know we have more participants than the 2 I see on the screen. So we'll give a few more minutes. See if everybody can log into Menti. Yeah, puppy's winning. That's really cute, actually. I was choosing these pictures with my family, and my kids were like, no cats. We're a dog family. It's like, well, not everybody is a dog family. That kitten's cute too. Perfect. So I see you can participate and use it. So I'm hoping you'll keep answering and sending messages. Feel free also to unmute yourself and participate. We will stop the recording for that. Or you can send chat through the WebEx Messenger too. I'll be checking those too. I'll try to multitask. But Malahat or Sarah, if you see a message, just let me know. Good? So we'll be talking about decision fatigue today and how that applies to parenting. And then within the reopening, what does it look like when we're going ahead? What our kids will have to struggle with. Before I start, I wanted to get an idea of how old your children are, because that will help me shape the examples I give you and the scenarios I use, depending on what's the span of ages that we have in the audience. So how old are your kids? You can enter as many answers there. Hey, pretty diverse. Awesome. Anybody else? I see from 5 to young adults. That's helpful. Thank you. I wanted to start with the idea of where we are if we think of this pandemic as going through stages, emotional stages. And depending on where we are in the world, we might be going through a different emotional stage because the situations in different countries, it's just so different. But basically, we consider that we all started in a state of fear. When things started to trickle and we got to like this huge input of information of what was happening, and there were a lot of unknowns, our own internal alarm system, our amygdala in our brain kicks in and puts us into this fear center protective reaction of mostly just acting. Here in the States, that was let's go out and buy toilet paper. And everybody was buying toilet paper. And we were buying Lysol and Clorox and non-perishable food. And that was that state of fear that even though it's really uncomfortable, it was giving us something tangible to do for us to feel that we were in control. We could go out and buy stuff, and that was in the way soothing. After that came this bit of a chunk of time that we call the honeymoon. We felt that we could see the positive side of being at home. Maybe we still had the idea that kids were going to go back to school in the fall. We were going to enjoy this summer. Yeah, it was going to be different, but a lot of people started shifting their mindset from worry to appreciation of the little things that we've lost in the just how busy our day-to-day life was before. A lot of cooking projects and crafts and painting and families building amazing decks and tree houses. That was the honeymoon period. A lot of board games, and we felt in control because we knew we had to be at home, that we had very clear, and I'm generalizing to most parts of the world. Please correct me if the experience in your own countries is different, but in the beginning of the pandemic, we mostly had clear guidelines that we had to stay home. Restaurants were closed, schools were closed. We barely had to make any decisions. Decisions were made for us. Okay? So again, not pleasant, uncomfortable, and that we had to swallow doing things or not doing things that we didn't want, but at least we knew what we had to do. And that gave us a sense of control. But as this started progressing and time went by, the anxiety and depression started kicking in. And we are going through that process, and our children are going through the same process. In the beginning of the summer, once kids started to realize, I'm not going to my sleepaway or summer camp anymore, or I'm really missing my friends. It was so-and-so birthday, and we would have been at the birthday party. They started to notice they've been missing out. This compounded by some lifting of restrictions in different countries. Again, it's been different. So some teens and some kids have started doing activities and getting together with peers, maybe going biking, maybe going to the pool, and other kids thinking, why am I not? Why am I not able to see my friends? Or should I be seeing my friends? I see that my other friend has been stuck at home. Is it dangerous what I'm doing? So the more there is a lifting of restrictions, the more space it is for decision making. And that increases our anxiety. And that's the center of the topic for today, is how the next stage, that is where, at least here in the DC area, I believe we are, that is the stage of confusion, and how that increases anxiety and depression, because we don't know exactly what we're supposed to be doing. We don't know exactly what's going to happen in the very short term. And that brings up a sense of being unsettled, a lot of uncertainty. The last stage in the emotional stages of the pandemic is the acceptance and the resolution. And I'm going to end this presentation when we end today in a hopeful note, because I truly feel hopeful that when we get to that purple square, we're going to be a much better society, and our kids are going to be incredibly stronger and resilient because of going through this. So the resolution will be, we went through this, but now we know we can. Now we know how strong we are. Now we can appreciate the little things in life and the big things like health and family and stability. But we're not there yet. We're still in that blue confusion state. Like that baby, like, what is going on? Okay? Remember that any questions you might have, you can send them in the chat or unmute yourselves. We're not that big of a group. I wanted to get an idea of what are some decisions you and your family are trying to make right now. And again, go to Menti and you can just type random, not random, but like short words, like decisions about schooling, decisions about going back to work. What are some decisions your family is trying to make right now? I know that in my family, it's been primarily centered in school, what to do about school. And I know of a lot of families that I work with that their decisions have been centered about vacation. Should we do something, go to the beach, try to, uh, uh, thank you, holiday travel is a good way to put it. For some other families, it's been visiting relatives or getting together with family and friends, social distancing. What has it been for you? And if you see a word there that resonates with you and you type it yourself, the word will keep getting bigger depending on how many responses we get. I want to get a sense as to what is giving us confusion. What are we trying to resolve? Homeschooling, that's a big one. Oh, and the bubbling. And yeah, a lot of school and college. It's interesting. This past week has been very big into new colleges or colleges that before they were saying they were going to open and now they're retracting. So it's a tough decision. Yeah, going out to dinner, socializing is very helpful. In our family has been primarily what to do about schools. Sarah, you mentioned about Montgomery County here in the DC area before announcing that it's going to be all virtual. And then we go onto Facebook and Instagram and you see social media and everybody is considering doing something different and there's so many options. And that image of the bear going grocery shopping resonates so much with me, the one I just showed, the GIF I showed before, because when we have so many alternatives, so many options, it puts much more pressure on ourselves to have to be the ones to choose. Initially, our school system here, where my 3 kids are in Montgomery County, they said that they were going to give us options, an option of all virtual and an option of a hybrid model, that they would go to school a few days and do virtual other days, and parents would be the ones that would have to choose. And I was feeling overly anxious, because how do I make that decision? So when the county decided, oh, okay, we're retracting what we were proposing before, it's going to be all virtual, I know of a lot of families that still do, that they're not happy with that. But for me personally, it was like, oh, at least I don't have to make the decision. Because whatever it is we have to tackle, we're going to pull on our strength, and we're going to talk about the resources we can use to do that, to make it work. But the decision-making process is so debilitating that that's what we've been struggling the most.
Deanna, may I just read one of the chat comments?
Please, and thank you.
I think that this didn't get into the Menti, but due to the mixed messages being sent country-wise, there's a considerable amount of confusion community-wide.
Yes, thank you so much for bringing that up. And we're actually going to talk about it in not the next slide, but the one after, that is the ambiguity of information, how that adds another layer of the difficulty in making decisions. Sorry that sometimes the slide does not move for some reason. There we go. So yes, thanks Malahad for checking on the chat. I'm not that good with multitasking as I thought I was gonna be. So that exhaustion that I was feeling, and that I wish I could see you all on video and ask for show of hands, who's been feeling exhausted? I have come to realize that stems from what it's called decision fatigue. I've been reading a lot about this because it helps me explain what I'm going through, that there is this finite total store of mental energy. We wish it be infinite and that we can continue pulling for that from that source, but no, there is a limit of how much mental energy we have. And when we have to make so many decisions and ruminate through them because we don't have clear signals that we can attach to just ground in one decision, we end up feeling exhausted from having to make too many choices. And those choices, they go from the big, like, should I send my kids to their dorm at college? And they stem from the big, such as, I haven't seen our grandparents, but my parents in such a long time, should we let them visit? But they also go to the small. What am I going to make for lunch? What are we going to have for dinner today? And the sum of all of those decisions that we have to make day after day, week after week, we end up feeling depleted. And the more choices we have to make, the harder each one becomes. Sometimes it happens that by the end of the day, I have to decide what I'm going to make for dinner. I was like, why does it feel so challenging? I'm feeling paralyzed by this decision. It's such a simple one. But it's not that I cannot decide what to make for dinner. It's the effect of everything that was happening through that day. So
sorry, I would just like to say that's a very good point, actually, at least for me personally as well. Because when you mentioned one,
end up feeling it physically as well. It feels that we're depleted of energy, that tiredness. I hear a lot of families that I work with that they say, no, I've never been so just at home. I spend so much time at home. I'm not commuting. I'm not like taking the kids to ballet and soccer and driving them everywhere, but I've never felt as tired. It's 10 p.m. and I'm dead in bed. And every time I hear that, this is what I'm thinking is going behind it. It's not that we're physically active, it's that our brain is in constant hyper alert, trying to find these signals we need to make decisions, but it's not finding them. We don't have those signals. So what we know from research is that what ends happening is that the more tired we are, we go to either starting to make reckless decisions, acting impulsively, or the opposite, that is just doing nothing, and is what we call decision paralysis, and just avoiding, postponing, procrastinating, having to make those decisions. And there is an aspect of personality that goes into it. For some people, when we're tired and exhausted, we tend to be more on the reckless side. Others tend to be more on the paralysis side. I know for me, I start getting stuck and postponing having to make the decisions. And I'm going to ask you in the next slide just to quickly poll into where do you think you are in the impulsive, reckless side, just deciding on the spit of the moment just because any decision is better than going through the process of having to make it, or in the avoidance of it. But then the last thing I want to mention about decision fatigue, and then we're going to delve into this at the end, is the concept that self-care is the key to decision making. And we don't think about it that way in the day-to-day. And I want to bring it to attention because it's the most important one. The researcher who penned the definition of decision fatigue said that even the wisest of people won't make good choices when they're not rested and their glucose is low. So if we're not sleeping and we're not eating, and I will add to that, we're not exercising, our brain is in no state to be able to make good choices and good decisions. But we'll end with that today in a little bit. Going back to what was mentioned before in the chat, and thank you for going ahead, is we're adding a secondary layer to this, that is we're dealing with very ambiguous and confusing information. There might be more than one solution to one problem. There's people that are definitely sure that they want to go back to school and that going back to a physical school is best for their kids. And then doing virtual school is another solution. And doing pods, that is a word that now everybody is using, at least here in the DC area, is another solution. And homeschooling is another solution. So we don't have one thing that we know we have to do and can do, like, okay, we have to stay home. It's mandated. Everything is closed. Everybody's doing it. It's not a comfortable thing to do, but we just do it. It feels much easier because it's being imposed. Adding to that is that we have a lot of unreliable information. Access of information is so humongous, and we get it for everywhere. And not only us, but our kids. My 13-year-old, almost 14-year-old, she's on Instagram quite often. And she brings to me a lot of things that she's reading, not only from friends, but articles that she believes are true, and that we have to teach them that not everything that you read, that it looks like it's coming from a good source, is true. How do we sort through all of the false information and biased information out there when we're making decisions? And the last aspect of this that makes it even more challenging is how fluid and rapid everything is changing. And then when we talked about COVID in March and April, it was looking very different than what it was looking now. And we're trying to make decisions about sending our kids to college, but coming in a month when they're supposed to go back, at least around here in some colleges, it might be looking much different. So whatever I'm deciding today based on the information I have today might change tomorrow. So I know I'm sounding a little dreadful. I'm not giving you a lot of hope in how challenging this is, but at least I want to normalize that it is hard and that it makes sense we're struggling to make decisions. So where do you think you are in that how decision fatigue presents for you? Because knowing how it presents for you will help you avoid both the recklessness and the paralysis once you can identify how it looks for you. Maybe try to think of also, how does it look for your kids? Teens tend to be on that reckless bar, although some teens are very big procrastinators. If we can see our kids acting reckless, can we start to think maybe it's because they're so exhausted and having to make decisions? Is this a good time that we can swoop in and put more structure and control and some rigidity for them because they need us to be making the decisions, they're acting reckless? It's interesting that most of us were in that paralysis category. It's also not a good one. So once we realize we're in it and we're postponing and avoiding making decisions, what are things we can do to kick in that brain processing again have us move forward in making decisions. So these are a few tips that they really work for me. Sometimes nothing works and it's just time. But I want you to keep in mind that when making decisions for your kids, we have to, this is more than anything, we have to switch from trying to base decisions on facts and past experiences and making lists and pros and cons. And hey, making lists, I was the biggest in my house. They know me for the pros and cons list. I was so good at them. And it's always good to use facts to make decisions. But again, because how changeable the situation is right now, even that is hard. So try to switch from basing the decisions on that into basing them on your family values. What do you value as a family? What is the most important to you? Let's go back to basics. Safety and health, time with family. If that time with family is of an essential value to you, then maybe that holiday vacation, considering safety and doing it in the proper way, that's going to be important to you. I work with families that the value they place in education and academics is higher than some of the families. I'm particularly not that worried about the academic year of my kids. They're still young. I tremendously worry about the social. So depending where you are, you're going to make different decisions than your neighbor and your friends and your sister. And that's okay. But you have to base them in what are your family values. Don't feel pressure by time. This is where I was 2 weeks ago when Montgomery County made the decision and everybody started talking about forming pods and getting together a few kids and hiring tutors. And it was just so overwhelming that I felt pressure. I also had to make a decision quickly. But when we're rushing and it's coming from a place of fear and anxiety, it's not a good time to make the decision. But reminding us that decisions are fluid and changeable and we have time to, maybe today I think this is what I'm going to do, but I'm going to wait it out till I really have to decide, am I going to hire a tutor or not? I'm opening my chat because I saw something pop up. Okay, could you explain basic decisions and basing decisions on facts? So the idea of basing decisions on facts, that's what we've always been told. And we still need to try to base them on facts, but the situation with COVID is that the facts are changing very rapidly. So yes, facts are important, but we cannot only expect that facts are going to help us make the decisions. Because whatever we decide today, there's going to be new information tomorrow that might totally trump that. That's why I put so much value in facing it on our family's values, no pun intended. Hoping, Sarah, that explains, but let me know and we can expand on it. But
because that was, I think, again,
how has this played out in our house? It's a simple one, so apologies if it's minimizing. I don't want to minimize the experience, but it was important in our house. Sleepaway camp is huge for my daughters. It's their safe haven, their safe place, the place where they're with friends, and it's a very important thing. And of course, it was canceled and it was devastating for them. One of the hardest things, because every kid is different, right? This was really challenging for them. So their sleepaway camp was offering some family weekends for families to be able to rent a cabin and just go social distance. And at the time, with the facts we had, the cases here in Maryland weren't as high, and we thought that things were in control and that they were going to get better. Those were the facts we had in that moment. So I made a reservation. I thought, okay, this is good. It's going to be good for my girls. I'm comfortable with it. But then the facts have kept changing. I don't feel as comfortable anymore. So I ended up canceling it. So decisions are not static. we will have to adjust. We'll have to change depending on what the facts we have in the moment. Okay?
Yeah, that's true. Which also at times brings a bit of frustration as well.
Of course, for sure. And it brings frustration for us, but it brings huge frustration for the children, but it also gives them a big learning opportunity. So going with the same example, my youngest daughter who's turning, she just turned 11, she was just so sad about us canceling camp. And it was a good teaching moment of we have to make hard decisions when we realize that's going to put us in danger, maybe not even us, but others, right? So how do we walk them through? We're not always going to make the decision that's going to be the easiest one or the less uncomfortable. We're going to decide to make choices knowing that they're going to make us feel bad and sad, but that they're the right ones. And the right one in the moment, again, they can change. Malahan, I'm saying thank you. Your message of helping build decision making in teams. I feel this is a responsibility for us as parents. When we decide everything for them, we're not giving them the choice and opportunities of learning. And we're gonna talk more about it in the next few slides. But I want to caution everybody to balance. I have this image in my head because we were flying a kite at a park near our house the other day, and I couldn't stop thinking that parenting and parenting teens more than anything else is like flying a kite. It's a hard thing flying a kite. You forget how hard it is if there's not a lot of wind, and then we constantly have to balance how much of that string and I'm going to let loose, how high up in the sky I'm going to let that kite go. If I let it go too high and there's a lot of wind, it's going to be blown away. But if I keep it super tight, it's not going to fly at all. So the balancing how much freedom we give them to make decisions, and when we pull and rail in that kite and start making decisions for them and structure their choices is the hard thing about parenting teens nowadays. Because if we see them acting reckless or being totally paralyzed by the choices, that's how we recognize we need to rail in the kite. We need to help them making some of these decisions for them, or at least putting some restrictions and more tangible information to help them make those decisions. But maybe in non-pandemic times, we wanted to just that kite let it go and help them make those decisions by themselves. But we'll talk more about that in a second. I wanna end this slide with the idea that every kid is different. So it's not only our family values and that every family is different, and what you might be doing, it's gonna look differently than your neighbor and your friends. But if you have more than one kid, you'll see, and we know that they have different needs. Different social needs, different academic needs, and different emotional needs. So we might end up making decisions that are different for each of them. And we have to make sure that we're basing the decisions that are going to benefit our children. So, how would you describe your kids? As introverts or extroverts? I know I have two of one and one big extrovert. So you can answer more than one choice in this. If you have each, just do each. Are they introverts or extroverts? Wow, that's very even. I'm impressed. Yeah. I have my 14, almost 14-year-old and my 6-year-old, they're quite introverts and very academic centric, and they love being in their rooms and reading, and they're a bit anxious about social interactions. My middle one, she's a party girl. She's quite extroverted, a lot of friends, and they're each struggling for different reasons. So understanding how the pandemic has affected kids with different personalities, it's been very interesting. The introverts are doing better now. They're able to handle quarantining and being social distance with much ease. They're not struggling with boredom as much of the extroverts because they find things to do at home. They read, they might play piano, they watch TV. They're energizing, they're re-energizing by doing activities by themselves. That is the definition of what an introvert is. We find energy by being by ourselves. The extroverts are struggling much more now. They're missing their friends, they're going stir crazy. Many of the kids I work with that are extroverts, the parents tell me, oh my God, they're bouncing off the walls. They're constantly wanting to interact. They're constantly interrupting when I'm working because they want to be with me. Plus, they're really sad they cannot see their friends. But this is going to totally shift after reopening. Because the introverts are not getting the practice they need of having social interaction and separating from us parents. They're in their comfort zone. They're very comfy at home where they feel safe. They have lost opportunities to practice doing that might make them uncomfortable, that is being with others, sitting at the lunch table in middle school, hearing all of the chatter of people talking around them, participating in class. Now they're just turning off their camera on school Zooms. They're not able to do that in real school. So I worry that the introvert, more shy kids are going to struggle whenever it is that we go back. In contrast, the extroverts sure are going to be thrilled. So how do we help our shy introverted kids? I'm going to bore you with the complete definition of what separation anxiety is, but if there's any questions about this, just chime in, unmute yourself, or send it in the chat. But basically, separation anxiety is the difficulty in being away from the figures that we're attached to, so our parents. And it's an anxiety, it's coming from an anxiety place. Okay, and see that I'm talking about separation anxiety, and not but this is the definition of separation anxiety disorder. Many kids would have some of these categories, but maybe not all of them that will require a diagnosis for a separation anxiety disorder. But if you have kids that have had in the past difficulty with sleeping overs at grandma's, or they felt anxious when you and your spouse would go out to dinner, or maybe felt uncomfortable going to school because they still wanted to be with you, or have said things like, what happens if, what if I'm lost, or I get kidnapped, or there is a car crash and you don't come home. That talks about the anxiety of losing you. And because we've all been at home, that anxiety has been calmed. They're not struggling with that right now. Kids that are anxious, they might have other fears. What happens if you get sick? That's been a big one right now, right? But not in the when you go out, I'm feeling insecure. But the problem with anxiety is that the only thing evidence-based we know that improves it is when very scaffolded and with a lot of strategy and skills, we expose our kids to whatever it is that is making them anxious. So if I'm working with a kid who's struggling with separation anxiety in pre-COVID times, I would encourage that kid to go for that sleepover. And we would work on skills that are going to help him or her process that anxiety and think it through and be brave and act with brave behavior and separate from mom and dad. We don't have those options now. We have lost opportunities to practice doing the things that we're afraid of. And the same goes for social anxiety. And social anxiety are the situations where we confuse shyness or being introverted with social anxiety. They're not the same. But we do know that the anxious socially anxious kids, they tend to be more on the introvert shy side. And they're constantly worrying what others are thinking about them. What if I say something that's going to embarrass myself when I'm in a group? They feel very uncomfortable in group settings. But again, they've been able to just be at home, interact by FaceTime or out on the porch with the maybe 2 or 3 friends that they feel comfortable with. So they have lost a ton of opportunities to practice and be exposed in what makes them feel anxious. We know that anxiety is like going into a cold pool. And even though it's super hot in the DC area now, and I would love to go in a cold pool, I actually don't like when the water is super cold. Because you go in and your whole body is like, oh, this feels so uncomfortable. And when I'm working with kids, I ask them, what happens when you're about to go in a cold pool and it feels uncomfortable, but all of your friends are in, everybody's having a good time. It's like, okay, you're going to really try. You're going to stay with it. You put your toe in, and maybe then you get it to your belly. That's like the most uncomfortable place. And if you stay in it long enough, what ends up happening? And many kids would tell me the water gets warmer. It's like, no, the water never changed temperature, but we get used to it. Our body just gets used to the uncomfortable. And then we don't feel it anymore. It's not uncomfortable anymore. And that is exactly what happens with anxiety. But right now, we're not having the social pool and the separation pool to allow them to get used to that water. On the contrary, they're getting used to what makes them comfortable, to their comfort zone. So that puts a big responsibility in us parents to be creative and find opportunities for exposure, for them to practice those social skills and separating from us. Because I truly worry that if we don't, they're going to tremendously struggle when it's time to go back to whatever the new normal would look like. I love this comic strip. It's like the controversial technique of simultaneously confronting the fear of height, snakes, and the dark. And we so don't want to do that to our kids, right? We don't want to just throw them out in the wild and let them figure it out. We have to do it slowly, and we have to do it carefully, but we have to push them. So how do we do that? Would love to hear some ideas. I'll kick in with a few, and then if anybody else have other ideas. My 13-year-old, she's quite shy, and in the spring while they were doing school, she was very not looking forward to turning on her camera on Zoom. And in my work with children, I've realized that many kids are struggling with turning on their cameras. Not only that even make it worse by stories that some kids are recording with their phones when their friends or peers are talking on Zoom and then doing memes with those videos. So there's like legitimate concern for not wanting to turn on your camera, but it comes from a place of being anxious of what others are going to perceive when they see me. So we've decided this summer to register my girl in a week of a virtual summer camp that it was very small in art, that is really what she likes, but it was not really because she needed to do more art. It's because she needed opportunities to have her camera on and get to know other kids on Zoom. And in the beginning, that first Monday, she was like, I'm not loving this, but it was like 4 hours every day. So she was getting in the pool. By Wednesday, she was fine, but Friday, she was missing it because we have to expose them. And the same goes with separating. So taking turns, if you have with your spouses or any older siblings, and then going out for a walk, going out to a park on the weekend just for a couple of hours, and leaving your kids home with your spouse or their older siblings, because they need to get comfortable with separating from you. Any questions or ideas or suggestions of what has worked in your own house, or any concerns you might have as to how this can play out for your own children? The camera on has been very present in my conversation with teens and parents, with younger kids too. My 6-year-old struggles with it too. I know here in Montgomery County, there's been a lot of talk county-wise to just make it mandated. As attendance is mandated in the schools, for teachers to mandate that their kids have, that the students have the camera on. And again, that would make it so much easier for kids, right? If it's not a choice they can make, it's a decision that's imposed on them. Then that way they cannot escape it. But it is what I find very interesting is that what's eliciting for kids is the sensation that they're constantly being watched and on the spotlight. That is not true. It's an irrational sensation, because now we all have our cameras on off, but if you're on Zoom and there's 30 participants in a Zoom, you're not able to see every video on your screen. And most of the time, if the teacher is talking, you're only seeing her. So the logic, actual rational truth is that our kids, even with the camera on, they're less exposed than in the classroom. But because we can see ourselves, I can see myself right now, and I can see all of my mannerisms, and I can see how my hair looks not very nice this morning. So they're constantly getting that automatic response of seeing themselves. They feel that everybody else is looking at them too. So that's what's been happening with the cameras, is that they feel constantly on the spotlight, and that's not pleasant. So I sure hope that it's required by schools for the kids to have their cameras on. There's other concerns about privacy and kids that are not proud of their surroundings. So if it's not the nice room, or if in the background it's a crowded place, a small apartment, and there's siblings, and so many kids are also choosing to have their cameras off because they might not be proud, or the sense of embarrassment of what's in the background. I'm reading quickly one of the comments. Apologies for the yeah, so it goes to the attachment, and this girl saying that she would prefer virtual at home school because she feels safe with parents. And I see it with my own kids. Again, it's totally expected, completely expected of what these kids have had to go through, the times that we're living. But the more reason, when you see that, when you notice that is happening, it's a good reminder that we have to push for the exposure. As parents, there's nothing more we want to do than protect them, and to constantly try to make them feel good and shelter them from every unpleasant and uncomfortable feeling. So when they're saying something feels uncomfortable, we just want to, at least I want to just hold them tight and, not let them feel that discomfort. But those are the reminders that actually that's the moment where, as parents, we have to push. So if some things are not doable. It's not that then you're going to decide to send them to school if that's not a safe option. But what are other ways that they can start separating from you? Like, for example, going out, if you have the possibility of an older sibling or a nanny at home, and making up a date night dinner with your spouse and going out on a picnic, even if it's in the neighborhood park, but being away so that she can go to bed by herself. Or going out on a hike by yourself, because that also calls to what we're going to talk about in a second, that is the self-care. I hope that answers the question, but I'll try to, this is our last slide, so I'll make sure that if there's more questions about that, we have the time. So that the last thing I want to say, and with full transparency, also say that I tremendously struggle with this myself, is that self-care is not selfish. As we saw in the beginning of the presentation, when I was talking about decision fatigue, we have to be rested in order to make positive and good decisions for our families. So if we're going to take care of ourselves, and it's hard to, we feel selfish by saying, okay, I need to take care of myself. Think about it as you have to do this in order to take care of your family. Don't overwhelm yourself with information and social media. everybody's going to be doing something, and probably everybody's going to be doing something different. And human nature, that's going to make you doubt of your own decisions. But know that you have to do what works for your own family and your own kids. It's not a race. You're not competing with anybody. So if others have hired tutors and you that fear in the back of your head of your kids being left out and others having more opportunities for learning and maybe more opportunity for socializing, that kicks in, remember that you're not going to make decisions that are based from anxiety and fear. You're going to calm that fear and anxiety. You're going to soothe yourself. And then you're going to go back to, what are my family values? And what is it that my own kids need? Don't feel pressure about what others are doing. And try to ration and be on a diet of social media and actually media as a whole. I struggle with this. I'm constantly reading the news and then chastising myself for doing that, because I know that's not doing me any good. It's so changeable than what is, what is it that I'm getting out of reading it in the morning and in the afternoon and at night? If better just read it at night, and then I shelter myself for the unpleasant of having to scroll through it the other times of the day. Then I also would encourage you to remind yourself frequently, this is my mantra, our kids are strong and resilient, and this will not define them or determine their academic future. I have to say this to myself many times in a day. I know, I trust from my heart that our kids are going to be okay. Actually, that they're going to be better when we're done with all of this. They're going to go through a very unpleasant life experience that is going to teach them so much about themselves and the strength of their personalities and the strength of their family. They're going to be able to tackle anything afterwards. So use this as your mantra if it can help you as it helps me. And then rest and sleep and nap and talk to friends and exercise and meditate and eat healthy and enjoy the small things and cry and vent and whatever it is that helps you, just do it without feeling that taking the time to do that when we are as busy, it's selfish, because it's not. This comes from an act of selflessness, of having to be okay to be able to take decisions for ourselves and our families. So I'm hoping that you can take some of this and know that we're all going through it and we're all struggling together, but we'll be able to handle it because we're a strong society. So with this, I end, but I want to make sure that we have some time for questions or comments or me learning from you. Every time I do one of these presentations, I learn something new because I just get so many good tips and suggestions from the participants. So please enlighten us with either what works in your house or any concerns you have for your own kids, that I be able to bring some more depth to those topics. So you can send it through Menti, or you can unmute yourselves and we can stop recording, or if that will make people more